All right, well, it's almost 12:05, so I think we'll get started. Thanks everyone for joining us for what is the lunch hour here in Houston. So my name is Caitlin Bolaños, and I'm the Senior Associate Director here at Lilie. And then we also have our faculty advisor for the minor, Dr. Hassan Panahi, on the call. And then we have our Executive Director, Kyle Judah, as well. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Lilie, we are a group on campus that is offering students the opportunity to learn about entrepreneurship through courses, co-curricular activities, and then when things resume back to normal, a co-working space or a lab here on campus. And over the last 4 or 5 years or so, we've been building the resources on campus for our students to explore this field. And in April, we received the fantastic news from the Faculty Senate that we have a minor now approved in entrepreneurship. So many of our students had been taking our courses and, dabbling into the opportunities that we had provided, but there was no formal pathway or to pursue our classes, and students often didn't get credit that applied to a minor or major. So now we have this new and exciting entrepreneurship minor, and this will be the first year that it actually goes into effect. And so we'd love just to take the next several minutes to give you a high-level overview about the minor and the purpose. And Dr. Panahi is going to talk more about the classes and the requirements. And then really what we're going to do is just open up the floor to the questions that you may have about the minor, because I'm sure if you have it, another person also has a very similar question. So please, when we get to this point, do not hesitate to ask any questions. So just to give you a little bit more information on the minor and the background there, and why Lilie thought it was essential that we offer a minor to our students. Over the last 20 years or so, entrepreneurship has evolved into quite a rigorous academic discipline. And this is a discipline that is based in theory, and there's research that drives the tools and the frameworks that we teach. And so, no, we can't give you the next idea to, start a unicorn company or give you the grit that's necessary to launch a startup. But what we can do is give you the lens or the framework that you can use to look at problems and come up with solutions on your own. And we give you a toolkit to kind of approach problem solving in a unique way that's advantageous to you, whether you want to start a company or whether you want to be a consultant or let's do product management or work in investment capital. Just whatever career that you're going to go into, we think that there's value in the things that we teach and having an entrepreneurial mindset. So for those of you who are interested in what exactly you'd get out of the entrepreneurship minor, when designing this and pulling the classes together, there are 3 specific learning outcomes that we were focused on. One, we want our students to understand the theories and the frameworks necessary to work through the entrepreneurial process. So if you're actually starting a company, you are equipped to do so and know how to do so. But in addition to that, the second thing we want our students to know is that we want them to develop this entrepreneurial mindset that they can apply to starting a company, or they can apply to, like I said before, any other career path that they may choose. So an entrepreneurial mindset, that involves you being able to identify unmet needs or market gaps. You can acquire feedback from relevant stakeholders and use that feedback to create a better solution. And then you can also test your hypotheses and try to solve problems. And so we have, actually knowing how to start a company, developing the mindset necessary to start a company. And then also we want our students that take the courses in our minor to be able to communicate the solutions that they've come up with to a variety of stakeholders. So there's this whole other element of communication that we have built into our minor. So, I mean, if you, like I said, and we can't emphasize this enough, if you think about these 3 outcomes, they'll obviously aid you in starting a company, but they're also going to aid you in a variety of careers. And so we just put down, and those those of you that were in Changemaker with us have seen this slide before, but we just put down a variety of different opportunities because we really can't think of a role in which you being able to solve problems creatively would not be advantageous to you or the product that you're producing or the work that you're doing. So this is just an idea, and this slide is meant to emphasize that our minor and the elements that we're teaching in our classes are going to be complementary to whatever area of study that you are pursuing and whatever major you decide to pursue. So I also just wanted to highlight just a couple students that have been in our program and what they're doing now. So several of our students who have taken our courses have gone on to, yes, they've gone on to start a few companies, but more importantly, and I think more relevantly to most of the students here at Rice, they've gone on to be consultants at some of the large firms. So they're using their problem solving frameworks to solve problems for a variety of clients that they work with at their consulting firm. We have students that go into early stage investing, and they take a look and they evaluate other companies, and they have to know the startup and the entrepreneurial process inside and out in order to help these early stage companies. And we have students who go into Facebook or other large companies and do product management and develop new products internally for companies. So, I mean, that's just 3 of thousands of different roles that we see our students pursuing. But with that, I'd love to turn it over to Dr. Panahi so he can talk a little bit more specifically about the classes in the minor.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Caitlin. So real quick, as Caitlin mentioned, I am the faculty advisor for the Entrepreneurship Minor. What that basically means to most of you is that should you decide to do the Entrepreneurship Minor, you're probably at some point going to meet with me, one, to answer any questions you might have, but then also just to give you a sense of sort of what to expect as you go along this path. And as Caitlin said, we're really excited about this opportunity because this has been something that we heard from the students was really important to them, and the ability to offer this minor and give you a very predictable pathway to follow, I think it's something that'll be very useful for you as you consider how entrepreneurship might impact whatever career path you decide to choose. So real quick, I wanted to address a question that I guarantee is probably going to come in the Q&A, which is, there's a business minor, there's an entrepreneurship minor. Entrepreneurship is business, right? So like the classes that are in the business minor should just, count towards the entrepreneurship minor, and, I'm already halfway there. Well, the reality is that, the business minor and us being in the business school, we very much work very closely with the undergraduate business program, the undergraduate business minor, very well aware of the classes, the curriculum offerings, and so on. Just at a very fundamental level, one way to think about this is that when you're looking at the courses that you take in the business minor, things like finance, accounting, communications, and so on, those are all designed for people that are going into existing businesses. The operations are already sort of up and running, you're coming in, you're slotting yourself in within a certain role, and understanding the different units and different parts of a business help you become a better employee, a better leader, and so on, right? Entrepreneurship is dramatically different because with entrepreneurship, you're not starting with an existing business, you're starting with nothing. And so the types of questions that you're answering, the types of uncertainties that you're dealing with are on a completely different level. And that's not to say that one is more important than another, but depending on which perspective you're taking, the sort of frameworks, the tools, the tactics, everything you're using is going to be different. There might be, maybe some overlap in, let's say, some topics here and there in regards to like, you should think about your marketing, you should think about your customer, and so on. But to the level that we dive into when it comes to our entrepreneurship classes is very much focused on those initial first steps, which is something that you will not find in the business minor, which is just a long way of me saying that the business minor classes do not count towards the entrepreneurship minor. They are dramatically different classes, and you can get a lot from taking both if you have the bandwidth to do so. But again, if you're looking for that entrepreneurial mindset, I think you'll find that our offerings and what we do is a little bit more focused on that. Whereas if you're more interested in like, I need to understand business because I'm going to go work in a business, and I need to understand how all those units function, then the business minor makes a lot more sense for you. So one other thing I wanted to mention real quick, and I know this was on the introductory slide, If you go to minor.lilie.link, that will actually take you to a page that is designed specifically for the minor, gives you all the details about the courses. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what the courses are. And of course, if you have questions about specific ones to the extent that I have taught them in the past or know about them, I'd be happy to answer them. If not, we can connect you to the right faculty that can help you with that. But every single person that goes through the minor will have to take 12 credit hours of what we call our core curricular offerings. I have taught half the classes that you see in this core curricular offering. So I've taught Lilie Design Thinking, and I still currently teach Lilie New Enterprises. And one thing you'll notice about this slide that you're seeing right now is that the courses are offered during certain times of the year. So as you're thinking about the minor, you want to be thinking about what's offered in the fall versus what's offered in the spring and so on. So there is currently no course within the entrepreneurship minor that is offered multiple times in a year. So just be very mindful about that. So one other thing I'll mention about this is that when it comes to the core classes, the order in which you take the courses does not matter necessarily. It's not required that you follow by course number. However, I would highly recommend that before you take any of the classes in the minor, if you can, to take Busy 220 Lilie Design Thinking, because I think what Lilie Design Thinking does is it really helps you set the stage for that early sort of problem solving framework that you need to be thinking about. And so a lot of these other courses that you're going to get into, while you can certainly sign up for them whenever you want, the core classes, they're going to make a lot more sense. You're going to get much richer experience if you actually take design thinking first, if you can. From there, if you take design thinking, you may also consider taking New Enterprises afterwards. New Enterprises is the sort of the initial venture creation class. So I have an idea, how do I get started? We also have a course on financial modeling. That's what modeling for entrepreneurs is. So again, whereas you're going into an existing business, you might have existing income statements and cash flow statements and so on to look at. With modeling for entrepreneurs, what you're doing is really starting from the ground up. You're looking at the assumptions and the ways that you're thinking about the business, and then from there, actually creating a financial model and a way of thinking about how your business is going to operate. There's another fantastic course, Entrepreneurial Strategy, that's part of the core. This course is taught, I highlight this course because it's taught by the head of our entrepreneurship program, Professor Yael Hochberg. Really fantastic course, really great opportunity to interact with her in the classroom as well. Highly recommend that one. Obviously, it's required for the minor, so at some point you're going to cross it anyways. And then from there, you have a few options, right? So we have elective courses that you can take. One thing that's worth mentioning about the minor is that we have created this minor in collaboration with the College of Engineering. So the courses that we have identified here are courses that you can take in whatever sort of mix you want, as long as it counts up to 3 credit hours. The easiest way to do this is to just sign up for something like Financing the Startup Venture, Busy 461, which is a 3 credit hour course, which Kyle teaches, our executive director. Or you can take, if you've taken NG 315 in the past, and that counts as well, or you can mix and match. So you'll notice here that there's RSEL 450, Project Management and Leadership. You can pair that with the Leadership Lab, the Entrepreneurship Independent Study it's offered through the engineering school, or a new course that we're creating called Entrepreneurial Communication, Busy 361. And then once you've done all that, you take the capstone, which can be either Lilie New Venture Challenge, which is basically a course that is designed for teams and people that already have an idea, that want to continue moving their idea forward, that are possibly very serious about launching, or at the very least are a little bit more advanced. Or you can take a social entrepreneurship course, or the student venture fund course. And the student venture fund course, in case you're wondering, is actually a course where you get to act like a venture capitalist. And the way this works is that we have some generous Rice alums that have donated $2 million for a small investment fund. And what you do in the class is you work alongside MBA students and other people in the class to vet actual companies that are out there searching for money. And at the end of the semester, you basically issue a recommendation to a board about whether or not you would invest in that company, and here's why not, and so on. And then from there, Rice actually does put a very small amount of money, usually around $25,000, alongside other investors into the companies. So there's an opportunity for you, even if you decide never to be going out raising money, never decide to be an entrepreneur or anything like that, you get this totally other different perspective, which is really interesting, and an opportunity to work with other people outside of your outside of the undergraduate population, because you'll be paired with business schools, with MBA students and so on. So I think that's a pretty exciting experience to be a part of. So these are our offerings. So the 12 credit hours, the 12 core credit hours, the 3 credit hours for electives, and then the 3 credit hours of the capstone. So a total of 18 hours that you would take to complete the minor. All right. That is like the quick sort of 20-minute overview of the Entrepreneurship Minor. Like we said, like Caitlin mentioned earlier, we're actually here mainly to answer the questions that you all might have about the minor. Anything about the courses, again, that we could provide details on. And I think the best way for us to probably do this is if you click on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, you should see something pop up that'll show you everyone that's participating. In there, at the bottom of that portion should be a raise hand function. So please use the raise hand function and we will call on individual people with whatever questions you might have about the minor. Questions. You can also type them into the chat if that's better for you. Jacob.
Oh, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jacob. It was very nice to hear from you guys about the Entrepreneurship Minor. I'm actually a student who's on a gap year right now, so I won't be coming until a year after you guys have already been working with the program. But I was curious, so I know this is not the business minor, and I'm not trying to draw a parallel to the content between the two. But something that I like to talk about with my friends is the idea that like people who want to really do business minor doesn't necessarily translate to doing business. Like in the same way, this is going to provide, the question would be like, what kind of frameworks are we providing here that make people into entrepreneurs as opposed to like innate skill that you kind of need to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, this is like one of those nature or nurture sort of questions, right? Is it, I mean, are you born an entrepreneur? Is it, there's actually like a lot of data that suggests, for example, that if you come from a family of entrepreneurs, you're more likely to start a company. Some people come in with the intentions of, I want to be an entrepreneur. Some people discover that along the way. I think what you're going to get out of the courses is entrepreneurship is very daunting for a number of different dimensions. And Kyle, I'd love for you to chime in on this as well. But I think one of the biggest challenges is just knowing where to start and which out of like the 100 different things that you could be focusing on, should you be focusing on first? And how do you do that at a level that's deep enough to not just be fooling yourself by gathering the data that supports whatever, like how cool your idea is, but actually points to a real need. And so a lot of what we focus on in the very beginning in the minor is really that needs finding process, is really that process of validating the pain points, is really that process of, gathering as much empathy as you can for someone and to be able to pinpoint who those first customers might be. And then as you progress throughout the minor, what ends up happening is we start to get into the topics that start to become more relevant once you've validated that. Questions such as, how do I think about my financials? Questions such as, how do I think about founding my team? How do I think about dividing up the percentage that each person should have on the team? How do I find the right people to be on my team? And what, should I find people that have the same skill sets as me, different skill sets as me, and so on. And so what you'll find throughout the minor is that bits and pieces of that, we sort of try to introduce these bits and pieces to you along the way and sort of the progression that we think makes the most sense for most people. And we also try to be very mindful of the fact that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Right. So we're going to show you a general framework and a general way of thinking. But what you're going to find as you go into the later classes. So, for example, New Venture Challenge, which is the class that I teach, which is one of the capstone courses. It's not a lecture. It's not, at this point, you've taken all the entrepreneurship classes, you understand the process. It's about sitting down with you, meeting you where you are on whatever you're working on, and trying to connect you to whatever resources that you need to keep moving. And that could be more resources such as, I need specific information about legal issues, or it could be something like, I need to speak to someone that knows about X. And that's where we start to really reach out to our alumni and other people that we could bring in that sort of give you that guidance and that expertise and so on. So we're not taking a perspective of, you're going to come into this and we're going to tell you all of the answers. We're really just trying to open up the right doors for you to get you where you need to go, depending on what your interests are. Kyle, do you have anything to add to that, actually?
Yeah, I'll plus one everything that Dr. Panayi just said. The reality is, all the most well-known entrepreneurs that you can think of, Sarah Blakely with Spanx, or Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, you name it, right? At some point before they started their companies, they weren't an entrepreneur. So everybody kind of starts from that same starting point. What we're trying to do is bridge the gap that I think has really existed between the theory of starting a business and the actual practice of doing it. Because entrepreneurship is a contact sport. You can't learn it just by watching other people do it. You can't learn it just by reading TechCrunch or Medium blog posts or just hanging out on Twitter 24/7 doom scrolling your way through the fall semester. You really have to get in the game, take some lumps, but we want to make sure that you're doing so in the safe environment of what's going on in the class, where you can get those reps and build that muscle memory so that, everybody makes mistakes as a founder. We want you to do it in a way so that you're learning about what mistakes get made most frequently. You're encountering some of those challenges. You're learning from that while you're kind of still in this incubator of what's going on in the classroom and Rice and Lilie, so that whether you're a student, whether it's 10 years after you graduate, you have that muscle memory, you have the skills, you have the knowledge to avoid stepping on some of those landmines that a lot of founders, I know I did it myself. I'm sure Hassam did the same when he was going through as a founder. It is an inevitability, but we want you to not make those 101 level mistakes when there's real money and time and energy on the line, versus learning how to do it by actually going and doing it. So I think that's the point of what we're trying to do in our classes, is make sure that we're bridging that gap from theory to practice, immersing you in very problem-rich environments. So you're learning about what are the real world problems out there that need solving, and just giving you that process and that tool belt. So like Hassam said, you know exactly what to do on day one. And how does that set you up for what you do on day two? And out of the million different things you should be focusing on, what's the most high leverage areas you can dedicate yourself to in month one versus year 10? So that's the general thought process. As both Caitlin and Hassam have said, I think there's a lot of good things you can apply from traditional business classes, but the entrepreneurship coursework that we're trying to put together here is intended to support you at each step of your journey into entrepreneurship and into exploring it, and just making sure that you have the specialized skills, processes, knowledge, network, and connections that you need to start your own company from scratch, versus going and making an impact in an established company. But great question, Jacob.
Thank you, guys.
I'm going to answer a couple of questions in chat. So Ron asks, would you recommend taking design thinking in our first semester? And I would say absolutely yes. I think of design thinking as many of you have, if you're already at Rice, or if you're considering, or if you're joining this upcoming semester, you've probably heard of like Engineering 120, NG 120, which is sort of like the introductory engineering design class that a lot of people get super excited about taking when they first join Rice. I sort of equate this class, design thinking, to that. I mean, it's very much project-based learning. It's engaging. It's useful material that, again, outside of entrepreneurship is going to be valuable for you. So definitely, it's a good idea to sign up for that class sooner rather than later. It is also one of those classes which will probably fill up. I mean, as the minor becomes more popular, it's going to fill up rather quickly. So if you can get it in sooner, definitely do. So you don't need to have any experience coming into it. Just come into it with an open mind. Juan asks, are there any technology classes such as AI? We don't have any technology specific classes. We do think a lot about how different technologies can solve different problems for people, but we don't specifically dive into particular technologies or industries. Ron had another question about getting involved with Lilie outside the classroom. Yes, we have a number of ways you can get involved. We're very conscious of the fact that as Rice students, you have, some of you are taking 18 hours, have a number of other co-curricular activities that you're doing. Best piece of advice there in terms of figuring out what we're doing. Obviously, we have a newsletter at entrepreneurship.rice.edu that you can sign up for. Aside from that, obviously Facebook, LinkedIn, so on, we have our events and everything posted, but also just reach out to us, right? So, I mean, there's a ton of content on our website. There's a ton of things that sort of describes what we do, but you're always welcome to reach out to either myself, Kyle, Caitlin. Let us know what you're looking for, what your interests are, where you're trying to get to, and we'll help you figure out what sort of activities and different offerings that we have that help you along the way. And it's worth mentioning that we sort of follow our own advice, right? So we are constantly iterating, constantly revising, constantly reimagining and thinking about what we could change, do differently, do better, add, subtract, whatever it might be. So this information, you coming to us, letting us know what your needs are, helps us think more about where we can make additions and changes and so on as we continue to grow the program. Rudy asks, as someone who wants to own their own medical practice, how will an entrepreneurship minor benefit me versus a business minor? Yeah, so I think the big thing here is again, when you want to start a medical practice or any type of business, there are 1,000 different decisions that you might be thinking about. And depending on, and it's really interesting because depending on who you talk to, people might tell you to focus on one thing versus another thing. And a lot of times that comes from their own personal experiences. You might go talk to a successful entrepreneur and say, look, I need you to come up with financial statements, step one. Right. And so you go down this rabbit hole and do that. Right. You talk to someone else and they say, I need you to write a business plan, or I need you to go find an investor. I mean, these are like the typical sort of responses you might get from different groups of people. And that's not to say that one is right over the other, but what we are able to, what the courses allow you to do is it allows you to like follow a rigorous, like Kyle said, grounded in theory, grounded in research, grounded in best practices, grounded in the work that people have done as entrepreneurs, right? It's not a textbook. It's things that we've actually experienced, failures that we've had, successes that we've had, right? And so it's that perspective that helps you do that. Whereas with the business minor, you would get a lot of insight in terms of running operations once it's up and running, but not as much focus on sort of those first steps and focusing on what's really important at the beginning. All right, Raj, I see you have your hand up.
Hi, so yeah, I'm Raj. I'm a prospective student actually, and I was wondering, so I know you all were talking about how engineering was connected with the entrepreneurship minor and about design thinking, but I was just wondering, like, in general, like, how is engineering represented in this minor, and like, what ways are they connected, and like, what engineering do you all do specifically?
How is engineering represented in this minor? Let's see. I would say certainly from in terms of the elective offerings, right? There are a number of courses that we looked at in the engineering school that we thought were complementary to what we were doing in the minor. I would say generally the courses that we offer are industry major agnostic, right? So we're not focused, we try not to focus on, let's say, high tech, high growth startups as the only outcome of our classes, right? Certainly that seems to be an area that many students are interested in, but there are a lot of students interested in starting an impact venture or a nonprofit or something that may not have a physical product or service associated with it, right? They just want to do good and they want to figure out what those first steps might look like. So we, outside of the electives, there's not really a heavy focus on the engineering discipline. Having said that, you know, I come from a software engineering background. We have mentors and people that come from engineering backgrounds, alums and so on, that are able to give much more curated and specific advice depending on what advice depending on what you're looking for. So we take that sort of approach, right? We try to be a little broader in our classes to appeal to everyone, and then depending on what your specific interests, needs, what you're working on are, we then try to find you people and resources that are going to be helpful for you along the way.
Okay, thanks so much.
Yep. Other questions?
Jacob, do you have another question, or is your hand down again?
Oh, I think, yeah, you lowered it.
Down. Okay. Please don't be hesitant to ask. This is our first info session that we're hosting, and this is the first time, you know, we have a minor. So we're very curious as to what the questions are that the students have.
I could play music just to pass the time if that's. Jacob, I see your hand, you have your hand up again. Thank you for saving us. What is your question?
Listen, I've been on your end of things, and I don't ask. No, so as you can see, I'm in a different place now. But my question was more along the lines of this time. So say you're someone doing the entrepreneurship minor, your goal really is to like form a startup, something like that. But by the end of your time at Rice, your great idea hasn't hit you, right? So what is the path you guys recommend then? Because some of the things like I personally have thought about is like going and working for other startups, and then pursuing more education and those kind of things. And I'm curious as to what you, as like the heads of the entrepreneurship minor, recommend in that kind of, I wouldn't say inevitable, but you know, more likely scenario that you get a $1 million idea right off the bat.
Kyle, I think this is right up your alley.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure I don't get whiplash from nodding so hard. It's a great question, and it's a great point that you answer. And the reality is there's no one correct linear path for you to take that's going to guarantee that, okay, if you go and work for a high growth venture for 2 or 3 years after you graduate, well, then you're definitely going to launch a startup next after that. I've met people who have gone from academic research labs to becoming a founder, people who have spent the first couple of years at a big established tech company like Google or Twitter or Facebook, Uber, Amazon, you name it, right? The other path is also, going and working for early stage high growth ventures, and there's a lot of different pros and cons to each of those different paths, right? Maybe you get more structure, more mentorship, a more guided approach to learning about business problems, developing new tech products at a bigger established company, just because they have those processes, that hierarchy, that mentorship in place. Your ceiling for learning and the slope of your learning curve will never be higher than at an early stage startup, because the opportunity to gain and take on new responsibilities just happens so much faster at a startup versus an established company. But there is no one right way. I think our general approach and our thesis about exploring and learning and trying out entrepreneurship while you're a student at Rice is that we want to make sure you have this, both the entrepreneurial mindset, but also, as Caitlin and Assam mentioned, that kind of Batman tool belt of different skills that you can tap into whenever you need it, whether that's while you're a student or, again, 5, 10, 20 years after you graduate. So we want to make sure you've got kind of the foundational perspective to be able to keep your head on a swivel, identify problems, know about the process of speaking to users, immersing yourself in understanding the pain that they experience in that problem space. And then the skills to be able to kind of pick and choose from. Okay, I know how to do customer development interviews or empathy interviews to understand about my customers a little bit more. Okay, I know how to do janky cardboard and styrofoam prototyping, or using Balsamic to do some mock-ups really quickly versus a multi-year product development process before anybody ever sees it. So, we would love for you to be able to start that $1 million idea while you're at Rice. We want to make sure that we're serving up the right people, opportunities, and resources to empower and encourage you to pursue that. But again, the reality is there's a large percentage of people who want to explore entrepreneurship while they're a student because it allows you to do so in that safe environment and learn from some of those failures, right? The reality is, if you're starting a venture while you're a freshman, by the time you're a senior, you'll probably have forgotten what that idea was. And it's not like it's a scarlet letter of failure. I can't even tell you, my first venture was an astronomical failure that we would have been, in a better place just setting the money on fire versus doing the venture. But boy, did I learn a lot from that experience. And I think those learnings are what helped put me on a path to the second startup, which ended up becoming, a successful exit. And so there's no one correct path. Depending on what you're interested in, really the experience at Rice is about exploring all those different elements, striking that chord of what you're passionate about, what problems just keep you awake at night, what you're thinking about first thing in the morning when you're eating breakfast or in the shower, because that sets you on a path to really level up your own skills, explore, network, and build that community of other people who are passionate about the future of energy or the next space race and everything else, right? And that, I think, is really what we're all about here at Lilie.
Sorry, go ahead, Caitlin. I think I know.
Just one thing to add is that in addition to the opportunities that Kyle laid out, I think another very viable route is just going to work in the industry that you're interested in. So we had a student that was quite interested in tried to develop a startup while at Rice that would be used by HR departments in organization. He wanted to solve a problem in hiring, but he had never hired anyone and he had never formally held a job either. And so he ended up after Rice going to work in a very large HR department so he could better understand that problem space so that he can reimagine a solution to different problems that he identified.
Yeah, and a couple other things I just want to add to that. So, Jacob, you're asking about what if I want to maybe go work at a startup right after I graduate, or maybe even while you're at school, really. One other thing that we do, in addition to trying to connect you to the different resources to get started and so on, is also connecting you to people and companies and different groups that might be hiring, that are looking for people that have that mindset, that have that perspective. And maybe they're not the founder or the co-founder, maybe they're sort of an early employee, right? So maybe you come from, maybe you have a particular interest or a particular background based on your studies, and you could offer a real, a nice sort of addition to the team. And then the second thing I'll mention is that after you leave Rice, there is still a community here for you. And so we have a very strong alumni network, one that we're actually actively spending a lot of time growing. And so a lot of these people are people that are, yes, they might currently have their own business, but quite a few of them are actually people that are still just curious and are still wondering whether or not they should take the leap. And so what they're trying to do is they're looking for that community, which when you're an entrepreneur, it's sometimes hard to find that community, but they're looking for that community of people that they can talk to, that their problems sort of resonate with. And maybe at one point or another, they'll be able to make that leap, and there will be this support network that will help them do that. And so we've had alumni reach out to us with different questions asked, types of people they want to be connected with, whatever it might be, and we're more than happy to make those connections. So just understand that it's not about like, you take our classes, you get the minor, you head out, we're done with you. Even if you don't take any of our classes, but you graduate and you're interested in working on a venture, like reach out to us and let us know what we can do to help.
Just to add on to that, almost every business, almost every industry these days is impacted by technology. And I think a lot of people think that, oh, if it's in, a traditional oil and gas company like a Chevron or Phillips, well, they don't need my entrepreneurial skills. But the reality is a lot of these traditional industries and businesses need exactly that these days to make that transition to a more tech-centric, to a more innovative, to a more entrepreneurial mindset, because the growth for them is not coming from their traditional lines of business. It's coming from developing new lines of business to exploit new opportunities. And that's why they so desperately need, whether you're talking, Boeing, Lockheed, Chevron, Google, whatever it is, they need people who are bringing that innovator's mindset, that entrepreneurial skill set to bear to help their business come into and really embrace the new set of challenges that everybody's experiencing. Everybody's learning on the fly how to work remotely, right? And what does that mean for innovation, new product development, identifying new customer segments and new customer behaviors? And so they need the fresh blood, the fresh perspective, and that innovator's perspective that all of you are going to bring, and that we're hoping to make sure that you're leaving the campus with by the end of the time, having explored the minor and the courses and the opportunities therein.
Great. So I'm going to answer a few more of the questions in the chat. So Ron says, could you elaborate more on new ventures? So we have two classes that are kind of around new ventures. One is called New Enterprise, Busy 221, which is offered in the spring. And one of them is Busy 469, which is the New Venture Challenge course. Busy 221 is New Enterprise. Is a course where you come in, everyone just comes in with whatever ideas. They might have different problems they want to solve. We form teams, and we go through like the very, very first few steps of the process, right? So figuring out who our customer is, figuring out what we can do for them, thinking a little bit about what that solution might look like, and then thinking about a way to actually test that, right? Or test parts of that. And then along the way in that class, you also get exposure to some surface level overview of what does it look like to go out and try to get money for my idea? What sort of legal questions should I be thinking about? What are some early like people issues I might be thinking about, right? What's it like to hear from a Rice founder and the experience they went through? New Venture Challenge is a little bit different, right? So it's much more an advanced course in a sense that you can almost think of it as like a venture studio. And what I mean by that is that different teams are going to be coming in and they'll be at different stages working on different ideas. Some of these teams might be two people that have a functioning product that they're trying to get to market. Some of these might be a team of like for engineers are trying to figure out whether a technology is commercializable, right? And so depending on what their needs are, depending on what their industry is, we all sort of level set in the beginning to make sure everyone's sort of on the same page in terms of the fundamentals. But then from there, we go into different directions, right? So what's happening is I'm checking in with you on a weekly basis, having a one-on-one with you, figuring out what you did in the last week, figuring out what you need to do in the next week, and then trying to connect you to whatever resources that might be helping you along the way. So it's very much like just in time, trying to get a sense of what works for you. So those are the two classes that you'll take. And oftentimes what we find is that we've had students, for example, this semester before they're about to graduate, they'll take New Venture Challenge. And the hope is that they'll take New Venture Challenge and then they'll graduate and they'll be able to continue working on their idea. And in fact, we've had that happen in the past where this sort of gives them a runway so they can easily transition from graduating to actually working on their idea full time. Next question, Sean asks, how overwhelming would it be to take on the minor if I intend to double major in mechanical engineering and physics? That is I don't know. That's a great question. Honestly, I have no clue about sort of the workload that's expected from you from engineering and physics. I know it is very rigorous. I will say there are students that we are speaking to right now that are considering the entrepreneurship minor that are double majoring in double majoring. I don't know if they're all engineering based, but there are certainly people double majoring that are also minoring in entrepreneurship. And I think that one thing to keep in mind with the entrepreneurship curriculum is that at least a few of the courses are project-based and team-based. And so for those of you that have taken project-based and team-based classes before, you obviously know that there's pros and cons to that, right? Project-based learning is awesome, but being in teams has good and bad parts to it. So just think about that as you're thinking about your schedule and how much capacity you have outside of the classroom time to actually meet with your team. And that might sort of guide your decision about whether or not it makes sense for you. Kathleen's question is, can you go into more detail about what alums are working on? Caitlin, I think this is up your alley since you're so closely tied with the alums.
Yeah, so we could chat all day about this, but I think there's a few things. One, I'll put a link in the chat of our website for alumni, and that has one page on there that has some profiles of our alums as well as some video interviews with a few alums, so that might be helpful. In addition to that, I mean, we have alums working in a variety of fields. So we have everything from, so I don't know if there's a specific field that you might be interested in learning more about, but we have, alums in small businesses that have opened restaurants and bars here in Houston and cafes like across the world, to very like high tech ventures, as well as alums that are like breaking records for how wealthy they have gotten from investing in early stage companies. We have alums working on startups in the healthcare space, many that have stemmed out of a class that Dr. Panahi has been teaching. We have alums working in the traditional energy sector as well as the sustainable energy sector. So, I mean, it really, really spans the gamut. I'm trying to think of, Hassam, is there what's one of the more recent alumni and their ventures? I'm gonna circle back with everyone who is on this call.
Yeah, I think the website does a really, I mean, we'll talk about Abby, working mother, if you want to talk about work. I mean, it's an MBA student, but I think that's an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, so so one of our students identified this problem whereby mothers were having a very hard time breastfeeding at work. And so they were that was one of the many reasons that was contributing to them leaving the workforce in greater numbers than men, like these recent moms. And so there's actually a law that is not really well known or recognized, I don't think, but that does require companies to offer a safe, comfortable space for moms to pump while they're at work and away from their child. So she has created a solution that's akin to a corporate office gym. So I don't know if any of you are familiar, but sometimes very large corporate buildings that have different company tenants, they have a shared gym, and the companies can opt their employees into this gym and pay for the membership for their gym on behalf of their employees, and then anyone in that building can leverage that gym as like a nice perk. And so she's doing the same, but she's providing almost like a spa-like room for moms to go in and pump, and it has like all the supplies that they may need. And she is gaining a lot of traction here in Houston in the corporate offices.
Yeah. Great. So yeah, so the Rice alumni website has a number of profiles. We also on social media regularly highlight a lot of our alums. There are a lot of great alums doing a lot of amazing things, so definitely check that out. So Raj asks, is there a limit to the number of students that can be a part of this minor, or can everyone interested do it? Raj, if you want to get everyone at Rice to sign up for this minor, we would be thrilled. There is no limit. The limit theoretically is the class size, right? So if you take, for example, Lilie Design Thinking, because it's a project-based class, because of the design of it, it's capped at 36 students, and I think there's about 27 enrolled right now. So I think that the only limit really is making sure that you sign up early for the classes so that they don't fill up, because they're only offered once a semester or once a year. But technically there's no limit. And when we can, and we hope to eventually offer multiple sections, but we're just not there yet. Sydney has a question. Do many ecology and evolutionary biology majors engage in entrepreneurship at Lilie, and what advantages do you see for taking the entrepreneurial mindset into that industry? Kyle, do you want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, definitely. I think, there's a place at Lilie for anybody, regardless of your background, your interest area. That's part of what we want to do, is be some of that connective tissue across the campus and from campus to community, from people of different backgrounds, different skill sets, different experiences, but who are passionate about any given area. I've certainly seen ecology and evolutionary bio startups spring up from back in Boston when I was working at MIT. There are a number of those in the backyard there. Boulder has been a hub for a lot of evolutionary bio folks to explore lab grown meat products and alternative protein solutions for consumer goods and products. Doing coatings around fruit to be able to preserve them longer throughout the supply chain and onto grocery store shelves. Ginkgo Bio is a fantastic company that is CRISPRing and editing the DNA of a lot of different cell types to essentially have them produce a variety of different products. So rose perfume instead of sugar from yeast, right? And how that's going to completely rewire the cosmetics and beauty products industry and their whole cost structure. These are areas that are nascent but emerging. I mean, Ginkgo Bio is now $1 billion company. Beyond Meat, I don't even know what their market cap as a public company is these days, but these are companies and products and services and backgrounds that I think have to pull from a variety of different backgrounds and a variety of different major areas, engineering areas, because it's not one clean, clear solution. It's a systems problem. And when you're talking about systems problems, you need systems thinking that incorporate, whether it's folks from the liberal arts and sociology backgrounds, psychologists, scientists, you name it. But these are also the problems that we have to solve in order to bring the, Rice, Houston, the US, the world into the next century, because we have to leverage technology if we're going to feed everybody on the planet moving forward. We have to leverage new technology if we're going to reduce the impact of plastics in the world and clean up the oceans and develop new energy sources. All of these are the challenges that your generation are going to be shouldering the burden of. And it really is going to require people from all different sort of backgrounds to come together with a shared common passion of, oh boy, this is a big problem. Oh boy, we need to solve decarbonization. Oh boy, we need to, figure out, how to make our manufacturing or our food supply chains that much more robust and anti-fragile for things like global pandemics and other sorts of curveballs that are going to get thrown our way. So absolutely, there's a place at Lilie. There's a place in the startup community for anyone, regardless of your background. I am about at hour 36 of being a part of the Rice and Lilie family. So I don't know off the top of my head any alum startups that are operating in those specific areas, but I can tell you those are amongst the hottest sectors of new venture that are cooking right now.
Yeah, that's great. So Sydney had another question. Will the classes have an in-person option this fall? So because the classes are over, nearly all the classes are over 25, they're actually going to be online. However, I do want to make a very important note here. It, depending on what your reasons are for wanting in-person versus online, right? And I think that there's a lot of research that shows that online learning is not always as great as in person for a number of reasons. I will say that the person that is going to be teaching Busy 220 Lilie Design Thinking, her name is Angela Randall. She's actually been teaching online for about 5 or 6 years now. And she actually has developed quite a few engaging ways that are built and methods and processes and just the entire class setup that is not going to be like your typical look at a PowerPoint slide, sit in a Zoom lecture sort of experience. So while it may not be while it may not be in person, it's going to be as close to in person as you can get in terms of having an engaging, exciting, meaningful experience where you're actually learning something and being able to apply it. So that's what I'll say about that. But short answer to the question is unfortunately nothing in person this fall. You can imagine in a class like design thinking where you're on a whiteboard with sticky notes and all that kind of stuff, like in person is the best world for that to happen. But we've thought of some very creative ways to make it work online as well. About 5 more minutes left. So so again, use the raise hand function, post a question into chat, whatever you're most comfortable with, and we're happy to answer them. Going once. Going twice. No one. Where's Jacob? He gave up on us? Okay. Jennifer, can you speak more about the options of online classes? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? What you're specifically looking for? Oh, how will they be more innovative? Well, I think that we have spent a lot of time thinking about how to use breakout rooms and different whiteboard collaboration tools a little bit more than the average person might when it comes to Zoom. I've been teaching on Zoom now or teaching online, I guess, for about 1.5 years now. And along the way, I've had to take courses that have been in person and transform them to online before the pandemic even happened. So it's not like this is just something that just got thrown on us like 2 or 3 months ago because of the pandemic, but it's something that we've actively been thinking about. I will say in general, our classes are very much focused on being experiential and very much learning by doing. As Kyle mentioned earlier, you can't really learn entrepreneurship by reading a textbook. And so therefore, a lot of our activities and a lot of things that we do both in and out of the classroom are active learning, right? You're going there, you're applying what you're doing, you're working on a project. And to the extent that we've been able to replicate that online, I think we've found a couple of different ways that have worked. We found ways that have not worked for sure, and we've gotten rid of those, but we've also found some really good ways to make it work as well. So just to give you a quick example, last week we held a summit, and I know a couple of you are on the call right now, held a summit for incoming freshmen called the Lilie Changemaker Summit. This is a summit that in the past we had done in person for 3 days straight. We had to compress it into 3 2-hour Zoom sessions. And so part of doing that is how do you get the sort of like essential, the most important sort of learning objectives and distill it into a much smaller sort of event or much shorter event, but then also doing that through an online experience. And so we don't just create this curriculum and then launch it. We actually go through a series of tests before we put it in front of whoever is going to receive it. So in the case of Lilie Changemaker Summit, it wasn't that we just designed this thing and put it in front of them last week. We actually did multiple iterations of it with other students that were already in our program, refined it, revised it, did test runs. And so by the time we're getting in front of the group that we're actually trying to work with, yes, there's still going to be little snafus here and there. For those of you that are changemaker, you know what I'm talking about. But at the end of the day, it's going to be much more polished than you would typically expect from someone that's just making that quick transition to online.
One thing to just add on to that is I think the one advantage of online learning is it allows us to pull in a much more diverse and broad base of class speakers, mentors, experts in any area than those who might only be kind of in the Houston backyard and have the schedule flexibility where they can, come to a campus and, take a chunk of time. So it allows us to kind of really leverage the RICE network, the entrepreneurial network in all these amazing startup communities, not just across the US, but really around the world. And I think that's going to be something that, we're going to certainly lean in on because it allows us to give you exposure to so many more different people, perspectives, stories, experiences, problems than you might otherwise be able to have if everything was just in person, only about the co-location and everything like that. So, we know it's going to be a different sort of ball game with online learning, but we want to make sure that we're pulling in the great parts of what being virtual allows us to do as well.
Yeah, and in fact, last semester in the spring, when we were in our new enterprise class, we actually reached out to our alums that were across the country and had them come in and mentor some of the teams, something that we normally would not have been able to do because we typically do that in person. And it's very much like everyone goes into their room with their mentor and they have this conversation. Well, now it's, no, we're going to set up 15 Zoom calls, 15 mentors are going to go and get into those calls and meet with the appropriate teams and so on. So Jacob, I can answer your question if you want to stay on. It's 1 o'clock, but for those of you that, we're up on the hour, you're welcome to stay and ask whatever questions you'd like. We'll stay on the call for a few more minutes. Again, the website minor.lilie.link contains all of the information about the minor. You're welcome to reach out to either myself, Kyle, Caitlin, any questions you have about the courses, about how all this process works, let us know. Thanks for joining the session. We're really looking forward to seeing you all around virtually, at least for the short term, but seeing you all around with all of the Lilie programming and courses that we have available for you. So have an awesome rest of your Tuesday. And Jacob, to answer your question, how will project-based classes be done online? So I think there's a few things here. So a lot of our classes are, or at least the classes I'm thinking of that I'm a part of, involve you working on some sort of idea, right? And so to the extent that that sort of collaboration can happen online is, it's still pretty possible. I think where the challenges are when it comes to online is that we rely so much on going out and talking to customers and talking to users and trying to understand the problems, right? And a lot of times you can do that by reaching out to people via email or phone. But a lot of times what other ways that people have done that in the past is like, look, I'm solving a problem regarding someone's meal planning. Let me go to outside the grocery store and wait there and start asking people questions as they're coming in and out of the grocery store, right? You can't really do that right now, right? So, I mean, you could, but it's going to be weird. And we don't want to put you in a situation where you'd be putting yourself at risk or anything like that. So we have to get a little bit more creative about what customer discovery and going out and having those conversations might look like. But at the same time, going back to one of the strengths that Kyle mentioned earlier is that you're able to reach people that you might not have been able to reach previously, right? So to the extent that we can rely on virtual to be able to reach networks and groups of people that might be customers, users, subject matter experts, mentors, whatever it might be, you're going to get the advantage of that. So I think that, we've seen this transition last semester at the second half of the semester. We saw the transition to online and we found that most people were able to do it it worked out fairly well with most of the class projects. The exception being, of course, like I said, these interviews. And I think that when we're thinking about it from a pedagogical perspective, we're going to try to think of other ways that you might be able to capture that data that don't necessarily involve you physically going out and talking to someone in person. Yeah, no problem. Other questions? Yes, other Jacob.
Yes. So I've got my last one because I think
Okay.
I've given you guys enough. I actually wanted to know, like, what are the ways that the entrepreneurship minor addresses company ownership and employee compensation with stock and stuff like that? Yeah.
Kyle, do you want to answer that? No, it's okay. I'll do it. So we don't actively take a role in helping with that per se. What I'll say is that we do in one of our courses, actually in two of our courses, do talk about sort of these early people decisions, questions like, how do I think about equity? How do I divide up equity? What's the process, the structuring for that, right? Do I just give everyone like divide it up equally 3 ways and they all get it immediately, or do I find some way to spread it out over a period of time? And so what I think in those situations, what we try to do is we give you some high-level guidance, but at the end of the day, like, this is a conversation you have to have with your team. This is a conversation where you want to get an attorney involved. And so to the extent that we can sort of highlight some of the things that you should be thinking about, we do talk about that in the classroom and of course outside of the classroom too. But one thing I will mention is that this kind of touches on your question, which is you might be thinking, okay, let's say I work on a project with someone in a class, and then I want to continue working on the project after the class ends and this other person doesn't. How does equity work? Well, one of the things we do in the very beginning of the class, the first or second day of class, we basically say, look, if you have a project that you want to work on and you expect to probably work on it after the semester is over, and you are not interested in possibly bringing in people inside the classroom because you don't want to deal with it at the end of the semester, whatever it might be, don't bring it into the classroom, right? Apply the tools and techniques and the tactics outside of the classroom. Work on a different, because a lot of this is just building that muscle to understand, like, what are the different steps I need to take? And so to the extent that you're working on your own project inside the classroom versus not, you can always apply some of that stuff outside of the classroom as well. Now, New Venture Challenge, which is that capstone course that I mentioned before, is a situation where you'd want to bring in your own idea. You'd want to bring in whoever's going to be on your team and so on. But very early on for new enterprises and any of these project-based courses, we're very explicit about the fact that whatever you do in the classroom is academic. And so therefore, you cannot go at the end of the semester and basically say, oh, well, I worked on this project with this person. They owe me, 30% of the company or something like that, right? So that's sort of the stance we take on that.
Just to quickly add on to that, Jacob, I think, a lot of times first-time founders believe that the biggest trouble areas or the biggest challenges for them are either going to be on the business side of the house or on the technical and product side of the house. And I've now worked with hundreds, if not over 1,000 different, predominantly student-led ventures. And more often than not, the biggest source of tension ends up coming down to people problems, right? We don't know how to effectively communicate. I shied away from having that hard discussion about splitting equity early on. How do I recruit really amazing people and craft enough autonomy and responsibility so that they feel ownership and they feel fulfilled? And I think there's no one easy answer to that. But to Sam's point, we want to make sure that we're shining a big old spotlight on the minefield through which you're about to walk as a founder and say, hey, you actually want to have these equity discussions early. Hey, we actually want you to have the discussions about carving out clear roles for each person on the founding team early. Because that is a very common set of founders' dilemmas and founders' issues that continue to pop up across industries, across segments, across backgrounds, you name it. And then give you a framework for how to have some of those hard discussions while also saying, okay, this is going to be a legal issue and you're probably going to want to go and talk to an actual lawyer, right? Like I am not a lawyer, caveat, caveat, caveat. But again, just make sure these are real problems. Don't sleep on them. Don't kick the can down the road, because the last time you want to be having a tough, hard interpersonal discussion is when emotions are running high, right? At that point, it's almost too late, and you kind of have seeded the ground to be able to set the guardrails for having that conversation when everybody's calm, when there's not visions of, Scrooge McDuck swimming through a pile of gold coins dancing through every founder's head. So the earlier you can have those hard discussions, the earlier you can at least be aware of these potential problem areas and pitfalls. That's what we want to make sure you know what resources exist on and off campus to help you through those leverage points in the startup's journey. But that being said, we don't want to say you have to do it this way. You have to do even equity splits. It's much more nuanced than that.
Right. I was just thinking, you guys didn't make any mention. I know at the beginning of the summer, there was a Rice team working on low-cost ventilators that seemed like very big startup, or not startup, but entrepreneurship, product development type news to me. So that was very cool for sure.
Yeah, that was definitely cool. That actually came out of a lot of the work that the Oshman Engineering Design Kitchen does, which we have a very good relationship with. I was actually on a call with them earlier today, just thinking about ways we could take projects like that and bring them to fruition. And in the case of the ventilator, I believe they actually signed an agreement with a third-party company that's going to try to manufacture it. But we want to be there to support you if you do come up with something at the OEDK or elsewhere across campus, like connect you with the resources to actually bring it, whether it's you, the one that's going to bring it to fruition and bring it to market, or whether it's you handing it off to someone else that might be able to actually do that.
And that's a great idea of a team that didn't necessarily like take our courses, but they did participate in our business plan competition a couple years ago, and they actually received a lot of mentorship from our alumni. So they were able to work on their project within the scope of their engineering classes, but then leverage the resources, our co-curricular resources, to kind of help move them along.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I mean, it's almost sad that I won't be there to take the entrepreneurship minor next year, but I'll probably see you guys in fall 2021, and I really do look forward to meeting in person.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for all the good questions, for keeping it lively while fixing the dead silence. We appreciate it.
Of course.
All right. Well, I see there's a few people still on the call. I mean, I don't know if y'all are physically here or not. Natasha, I see you, so that's good.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for hosting this session. It was really informative.
Awesome.
Like right now, yeah, I was also at the Changemaker Summit.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm an incoming freshman, and I'm going to be majoring in mathematical economics. And right now, I'm trying to make the decision between pairing that with either computational and applied math, or data science, or entrepreneurship. I'm trying to decide between the three because I'm not sure which one would be the best to pair with there in order to reach my goals. I feel like they're all kind of closely interrelated. They would all work nicely together, but I'm not sure like what exact combination I should be going for here.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I wish I could think of someone you could speak with that maybe might be a few steps ahead of you, whether it's another student that you could speak with, but no one immediately comes to mind that would be a good fit for that. You're obviously aware of of the D2K lab and
I do, yeah.
And okay, great. So we work a lot with them as well. But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of overlap, or at least there's similar interests, or there are opportunities where you could find things to do to sort of touch all of those. So yeah, it's a tough decision. But again, like if for some reason, you can't fully commit to the minor, just remember you can always take whatever sort of suite of classes you like, co-curricular stuff. There's always ways to get involved outside of the minor.
Yeah, all right, good to know. But yeah, thank you for hosting this session. It was really informative.
Yeah, no problem. Good to see you again. All right. Thanks, everyone. We're going to close this out. Have an awesome Tuesday.
Yeah,
See
thank
ya.
you so much.
Yep, you're welcome. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.